process of preparing rice from paddy comes within the scope of material science, and in thus a part of Aparavidya. But the question as to why rice was created in the first place is Parama Prashna, and comes within the domain of Paravidya, because the source from which it has emerged lies outside the periphery of paddy. The question who has infused the potentiality in rice and why is also beyond the psychic arena, and hence Parama Prashna too. When the shadow of the moon is reflected on the earth, a lunar eclipse occurs. This is a scientific fact. Through the science of astronomy, human beings have discovered the reasons for an eclipse. Astronomy is part of Aparavidya. But who is the entity who causes the moon to cast its shadow on the earth? Astronomy cannot answer that question. It can tell us when the eclipse takes place and how, but nothing more. When knowledge concerns the mundane world, you look upon objects as the subject. That is, external objects are your psychic object. No matter how much you study the different stages of metamorphosis, an object passes through. The supreme subject of those objects will remain unknown to you. Likewise, when you are the subject, then your subject remains unknown to you. Therefore, in Aparavidya, you are the subject and the external physicalities are your psychic objects. But in Paravidya, the position is reversed. You and the external physicalities are the objects of another subject. The endeavor to discuss that subject, the knower, the witnessing entity, is the pursuit of Paravidya. You are not to look upon yourself as the knower or author of actions, but as the objective counterpart of the subjective entity. The supreme entity is the final authority in the universal laboratory, and you are just like a test tube in his hand. Being his object, you must gradually identify your unit identity with the macrocosmic identity. You must surrender totally to him. Thus, to get the proper answer to the supreme questions, there is no alternative except complete surrender to him. The effort to transform the unit identity into the macrocosmic I is called sadhana. What is an object? That which is accepted or rejected by the indriyas, or that which is ideated upon, is called an object or problem. Brahma is thinking of you. His thought process causes the creation, preservation and annihilation of all objects and entities. Hence you are his object, and he is your subject. He is not your object. To know him, you are to throw yourself into the introversive flow of macrocosmic imagination, and bring about the union between the entity which imagines and the entity which is imagined. To know Brahma means to become Brahma. As he is not your mental object, you cannot see him. Brahmavid Brahmaeva Bhavati. All the answers to the question of what and why regarding creation terminate in Brahma. The endeavor to merge one's individual authorship into Brahma is called Nivritti Mulaka Sadhana, path of self-abnegation. The last what and the last why of all the whats and whys is the supreme question. The answer to this question is that Brahma is the final authority, the supreme knower, and all other entities are his finite expressions. This is called Paramuttara, supreme answer. Human beings are animate beings. They are not animals. What is the difference between the two? Animals remain obsessed with the gratification of their crude propensities. They only try to satisfy their crude koshas. That is why in the minds of animals, what to speak of the supreme questions, even questions related to the mundane world do not arise. Human beings, however, are, and herein lies the main difference between them and animals, mind-predominant beings, preponderant beings. They possess the capacity of subtle thought which helps them find answers to increasingly complex questions, answers which have helped them to increase their dominance over nature. The same subtle thinking power has helped humans to attain Brahma, the source of all psychic thought, and the final answer to all queries. It is the characteristic of all animate beings to seek joy and composure. For animals that means the fulfillment of the crude propensities, but humans, by virtue of their developed thinking power, seek the deeper joys of life through the constant perfection of the subtle branches of relative knowledge. In the process of self-abnegation, they take their psychic thinking back to its supreme source and get established in eternal bliss. Those for whom the pursuit of the crude pleasures of life is the be-all and end-all of existence should never be categorized as human beings. Ahara nidra bhaya maitunisha samanya mitad pashu birnaranam dharmohi tesha madiko visheshu dharmena hinaha pashubi samanaha. Eating, sleeping, procreating, and fearing are the characteristic of both humans and animals. But human beings have an additional characteristic, dharma, which, if unexpressed, makes the human beings no better than animals. The human structure has been created for the purpose of attaining the supreme answer through spiritual sadhana. The proper utilization of human life can be evaluated according to the degree of progress achieved in sadhana. If an animal does not perform Brahma sadhana, it cannot be criticized, because it does not possess a sufficiently developed intellect. But if a human being does not practice sadhana, he or she can certainly be criticized. A destitute individual should not be blamed for not donating to charity, but if a wealthy person does not donate a cent for a good cause, it is highly reproachable, for he or she is being miserly. People averse to spiritual practice are worse than animals and birds, or even trees and stones. If people endowed with enormous